We broke the news before it broke us. The printing press in our basement had been quiet for 3 years, but some nights I still heard it breathing. My name is Sam. I'm the managing editor of The Beacon, a city paper that turned into a website with a stubborn soul. The man I loved was Leo, our photo director, who could make a broken streetlight look like a thesis and a bad day look like a choice. We lived above a guitar repair shop that tuned other people's nostalgia for rent money. On our fridge, in handwriting both of us claimed was the other's, we kept a card with 3 rules. Be home when you say, don't weaponize the headline, kiss before you sleep. We didn't write anything about sources, embargoes, or men with microphones who think truth is a mirror they invented. Election season is a prolonged form of insomnia. Our newsroom hummed like a vending machine that only sold adrenaline. The race for mayor had settled into its final dishonest calm. Incumbent Caldwell, tie like a warning flare, promised competence. Challenger Rivera, sleeves rolled and smile sharp, promised the future. My job was to keep the verbs honest and the commas polite. Leo was to kiss light into telling the truth. Adrian arrived on a windy Tuesday wearing a jacket that knew what it was doing and a smile that made sentences line up to be chosen. I'm here to help, he said, sticking out a hand like the room had asked to be shaken. He was the city hall reporter we couldn't afford but somehow had hired, poached from a station that thought nuance ruined ratings. The younger staff loved him. The older ones distrusted how easily his jokes landed. Leo watched him with the patience you give a dog that may or may not bite. The leak came in a brown envelope left under our door like a burned offering. Inside, a 50-page audit alleging a slush fund in the incumbent's office disguised as community enhancement grants. The dates matched election cycles. The recipients matched donors. A note paperclip to the top said simply, "Ask about the Cranes." I wanted to touch it with gloves and confessed as much to Leo, who took a picture of my hand hovering above it like reluctance was the evidence we needed. "I'll call legal," I said. Adrian said, "I'll call my source." He smiled like he already knew the answer to his own question. He moved closer than pronouns allow, breath a whisper of mint and ambition. The newsroom has blind corners that have watched men fail better. Adrian found one and made it seem like a conversation about fonts. We worked the story like it was delicate and wanted to be rough. Adrian met a man in a garage at midnight and came back smelling of gasoline and risk. Leo followed construction cranes to a warehouse where shipments arrived at odd hours and left with city seals affixed to nothing. I built a timeline that made my mouth taste like pennies, each date clicking into place like a debt that finally wanted to be paid. We had something. We also had a problem. The mayor's office sent a letter threatening to clarify matters in court if we published without context. Context meant a press conference. The campaign announced one for Thursday. It was Monday. We were tired and proud and dangerous. In rooms like ours, attraction learns how to pretend to be a deadline. Adrian and I were the last ones at the office when the coffee did that late-night trick of tasting like apology. He stood behind my chair reading copy over my shoulder, close enough I could feel the consonants in his chest. "This paragraph sings," he said. "You sing when you think no one's listening," I said, and I heard my own voice do the thing it does when I mistake a compliment for an exit. He didn't kiss me. He lifted the lanyard from my neck and let it slide against my collarbone, a gesture minor enough to be deniable, intimate enough to be archived by my skin. I leaned back a fraction and watched the ceiling learn a new secret. Then he stepped away because he is either ethical or strategic. Some men are both when it's convenient. I told Leo, because cowardice ruins coffee and love hates surprises. We stood in the kitchen between a bag of oranges someone had mistakenly bought for journalists and a microwave that earned its keep heating regret. "Did you want to kiss him?" he asked. I said I wanted to be someone who didn't have to answer. He nodded, walked over, and pressed his forehead to mine in the way that fixes the part of me that misunderstands gravity. "Don't make a headline out of a moment," he said. And then he kissed me, open-mouthed, until my name remembered whom it belonged to. The second temptation didn't bother with nuance. It wore a navy suit and a gold tie clip and an expression that needed to be recorded. Marco Diaz, Rivera's communications director, asked to meet off the record. He chose a bar that loved wood paneling and plausibility. He said, "We have documentation you'll want," and slid me a jump drive like a negotiation. His hand stayed on mine half a second past professional. The bar's mirror, all smears and promises, watched me consider the half-second. I was a good editor and a bad mammal. "Send it through secure channels," I said, withdrawing my hand like it had borrowed something expensive and couldn't afford it. He grinned. "I like you," he said, and the grin asked whether my life could withstand that compliment. I went back to the newsroom and committed to being the sort of man who sleeps. Sleep declined the invitation. Leo lay on his back, one arm flung over his eyes, the pose of people pretending not to be awake. I slid in beside him and put my mouth at his shoulder, the place he forgives first. "Here?" I asked. He turned toward me, removed my hand from my own restraint, and said yes with the softness that has saved me a dozen times more than any headline. We moved together like tired men who know which parts of each other still trust heat. After, he rested his palm on my chest like a paperweight and whispered, "We can be small and still be right." I didn't kiss Adrian. He kissed me. It happened in the stairwell behind the studio where Leo edits raw footage into truth with shoulders. The light flickered in a performative way like flickers do when they want to be in a story. He stepped into my space after a budget meeting where the word lean had become a prayer. He said, "We're going to win this," meaning the story, meaning the week, meaning something else. I said, "We're going to get sued," and he laughed, and his mouth was right there. And then it wasn't a decision so much as a physics proof. His lips were assertive and apologetic. I inhaled mint and calculation. We broke apart because the light stopped flickering, and I remembered I had a face. We looked at each other like adults in a room that contained the possibility of being worse adults. He touched my tie like he was fixing me and wasn't. I told Leo that night because our rules live on a card but also in our throats. He listened without blinking and set his cup down with the precise sound of porcelain learning a boundary. "Do you want him?" he asked. I said I wanted to want holes to be patched in me that were actually mine to fix. He laughed once, kindly and unkindly at the same time. "That's not an answer," he said. I shook my head and took his hands and put them on my face. "No," I said. "I want this." He kissed my knuckles like a contract. "Then show up," he said. "At dinner, in bed, in rooms where no one's shooting." The jump drive from Marco contained 3 PDFs, an internal memo about grant disbursements, a spreadsheet that looked like a cousin of the one I'd built, and an email thread where a deputy chief of staff wrote a sentence that was going to get someone fired in any timeline. "If we can keep the Crane schedule loose, the donors will be more flexible." The Cranes. The clue from the envelope. Adrian's source confirmed the memo's provenance. Our lawyer asked if the phrase "appears to show" could be upgraded to "shows." I adjusted a verb like it owed me rent. Thursday opened its mouth and became a week. The mayor called the press conference for 10 a.m. We published at 9:12. The push alert hit phones like a chorus clearing its throat. In the live stream window across our newsroom, Caldwell walked to the podium with the smile of a man who believed he could talk a traffic jam into applause. He called our report salacious, which is a word you hear when you've quoted too accurately. He said the grants were legal and the cranes were civic symbols. Adrian's piece was measured and merciless. Leo's photo of Caldwell blinking mid-defense became the social image that followed the story like a shadow. My headline was the sanest sentence I could write without crying. City audit tied, community grants to donor projects, Crane dates aligned. We were busy being right when the rumor arrived that we were being watched. Caldwell's team hinted to other outlets that we'd colluded with the Challenger. A friendly anchor used the phrase cozy sources. Marco texted me a link to the segment with the words sorry about the noise. Adrian said, "This is a hit," and looked at me like a conspiracy could be a duvet if we lay still enough. I told him we needed a second-day story, and then went to the bathroom and washed my face and thought about the stairwell, and then about Leo's hands. That night, the Beacons board hosted a fundraiser in our old press room with strings of lights tenacious as hope. Donors sipped something that wanted to be champagne when it grew up. I looked at the machines that had once filled the city with words and felt the old, bad muscle memory of wanting to be unaccountable and adored. Adrian wore a charcoal suit that made the lights look like they recognized him. He drifted through conversations like a weather system that promised rain, but delivered better hair. Marco showed up and shook my hand, grip firm, eyes forgiving in the way professionals forgive when they need you later. Leo found me by the paper cutter no one had thrown away and touched my elbow in the way he does when my mouth has made promises my chest hasn't backed up. "Come home early," he murmured. "Let other men take their compliments to bed alone." I nodded. He knows my seasons. He kissed the hinge of my jaw, that subtle place that maps my worst ideas, and I remembered how much I liked not being a headline. Adrian cornered me by a table of canapes I wanted to be braver than. "We should talk," he said, voice low, gaze on my mouth like he was reading out loud. "We did good," I said we did. "And?" he asked, meaning my body. "And I'm going home," I said, meaning my life. He exhaled, nodding like a man who understands the gravity of a door. "I like you when you're boring," he said, which was both sarcasm and a kindness. He touched my sleeve and didn't push. I left him with donors and good cheese and went upstairs to Leo, who had left the door unlocked like trust was a light we'd decided to leave on. We undressed each other like we'd been subpoenaed, slowly, carefully, aware that verbs matter. He stopped my hands when they reached his waistband and moved them back to his chest. "Here," he said, and I said yes, and we found the version of each other that isn't for publication. We were not cinematic. We were accurate. He tasted like mint and relief. I fell asleep with my face in the place between his neck and shoulder, my hand open on his ribs like a man counting a vote. The story didn't end us or the city. The cranes kept moving in their clean ballet across the skyline, money signed checks, voters stood in line and made their exhausted decisions. Caldwell lost by a margin that could be argued in bars for a decade. He congratulated Rivera with a civility that made commentators briefly sentimental. Our lawyer reminded us that accuracy is the only lubricant that keeps a newsroom from burning itself down. Adrian stayed because he likes a fight he can schedule. He and I became what we should have been. Men who nod in doorways and write each other emails that begin with a clause and end with a comma. Marco took a job out of state and sent me a photo of a diner where he said the eggs were honest. I sent back a picture of the press room lights and wrote, "We keep ours on." He responded with a heart that was almost a punctuation mark. Leo printed the winning photo and taped it crooked, on purpose, to the wall over our desk. He added a new rule to the card in his neat lettering: "Don't make a headline out of a moment." We keep failing at that in small ways. We keep correcting it. Some nights the old press breathes under us. Some mornings I wake up to find Leo already at the window with his camera, the city inside the lens pretending to be tame. He turns, catches me looking, and I walk over and take the camera gently from his hands and put it down. And he smiles in that way that is its own byline. And I kiss him before we make coffee, and the day remembers its job. When people ask how we broke the news without breaking ourselves, I tell them the secret is boring. We showed up where we said we would. We did the work twice as carefully as we wanted to. We admitted our verbs and took them home at night. Intrigue will always try to draft you. Infidelity will always offer better lighting. We chose the dark room we already owned. We kissed before we slept. We woke up in a city that doesn't owe us anything and gave it what we promised. A headline we could live with, and a life we didn't have to apologize for keeping.